before half of you came in, I said, looking around the room, and yeah, we all could use their program. There's a lot of people here could use this program. And we do use photography as a therapy tool, really. So a couple quick announcements. One announcement is that two of our people are right now volunteering. Bill and Jeff are volunteering, and they're shooting the Super Bowl for the Opportunity House, right? So they really wanted to be here, but they're actually volunteering right now. So look for their images to pop up on our website. A really good program. Another thing is that we did really well with DeWitt Jones. Thank you, Vince, and a lot of follow up from DeWitt and Vince also. And it sounds like he was just as moved as we were from our feedback to him. Anything you want to add to, Vince? I want Vince to jump up and down because he's going into therapy tomorrow.
Just very quickly, DeWitt and I had 2 phone conversations afterwards. He's now our best friend, kind of. Call him anytime about anything. And he said that it was probably one of the most enjoyable programs he has done. And he's traveled around the world doing these things. And what he liked was the exchanges that we had with him at the end. He felt that was great. He loved seeing the chat. I sent him that info, and he just was touched and moved by the emotions that many of the people noted in their chat and in their emails to me, which I put together the emails that I got and sent those to him as well. It was really quite a moving night, I think, for everybody emotionally. And photographer or not, I would urge everyone, if you weren't there, see the recording. Non-photographers too.
Also his TED Talk, if you haven't seen it.
Yeah, his TED Talk, which is referenced in the newsletter. In the next to last newsletter, there's a link to that. In the current newsletter that Jenny put out this past Friday, I have the answers to some questions that were sent to him by email, along with some other stuff related to his talk. So, sure. Our next one on February 19 is Guy Tall. And some of my friends, I don't know Guy Tall's work extremely well, although I haven't studied his website before inviting him. But I have a couple friends who say he's their absolute favorite photographer and teacher, and have done workshops with him and say he's spectacular. His draw is amazing. We've gotten 20 registrants signed up from his social media site. They all happened almost instantaneously as soon as he put it on Facebook. It's on his website, the announcement, and we got some immediately after that posting. That talk is sponsored by Cardinal Camera, and there's some information about Cardinal in the newsletter. So Guy Tall's talk, I think, should be extremely good. So hope you make it.
Yep. Thanks. Thank you. Thanks, Vince. And Vince and Dutch, and actually we're doing this for our special guest this summer, Lee. We're going to visit one of the cathedrals over in Berks County. So Vince is setting that up, so watch for that also. Any other announcements? Jay, do you have any announcements as far as other member speakers, programs coming up?
No, looking for people to present for October, November, and December. So if there's a special topic that you would like to speak on, or if you know of someone who has a special gift on a special topic, please share that with me so I could follow up with them.
Okay. So we're gonna turn it over to our guest speakers this evening, Kaylin Bryce and Amy Cook. They are directors of, I'll let them explain what it is. They use art, photography as a therapy tool at the VA in Lebanon hospital. And they want to bring their photography program over to Berks County. So they've asked us if we would be able to help. And we will be helping with them just on the photography side, what button to push, how to focus, things like that. And I'm really, really excited to be part of this. And I think all of us will be too after uh, they give us our talk this evening. So I'm going to turn it over to Amy and Kaylin. They're going to share their screen. They're going to share their screen and the presentation about the program and hopefully show some of the photography. Do you have any examples of photography and some of the stories behind the success stories behind the program? So, who's going to present? Amy, you're going to do the presentation, I believe.
Yes. Yep.
I will ask everyone to mute for now while they're speaking, and I will do the same. And then we will take questions and comments at the end. Okay. We will have the chat open, so if you want to add something to the chat, feel free. And Jay, I guess you're going to be watching the chat, and we'll watch it here too. Okay. All right. So I'm going to hand it over to Amy, and she's going to share her screen. So let me turn myself off. And go and take it away, Amy.
Okay. So I'm Amy Cook. I am the Chief of Recreation and Creative Art Therapy Services here at the Lebanon VA Medical Center. And Kaylin Bryce is also on the call. She is the art therapist at the Lebanon VA Medical Center. And she is currently facilitating the Seeing Lens program. So a little bit of history before we get into the bones of the program. I was working in the residential recovery center and doing some outpatient work with veterans, and really saw a need for some type of creative art intervention that really could tie in the creative arts with the recovery process. And worked with a social worker. We came up with multiple ideas. And then both of us kind of looked at each other. We're like, hey, what about photography? We could do something with photography. And our vision of the program did not turn out to be the way the program turned out. And I'll tell you a little bit about that. So we went to Lebanon Valley College and were able to connect with one of the professors there, Grant Taylor, and he is a co-developer of this program. So it was myself, Grant Taylor, and a social worker, Teresa Stump Klinger, who were originally developed the program. And our idea was that we were going to get cameras and we were going to take pictures, and then we were going to come back and we were going to have the veterans talk about why they took those pictures and have this kind of processing group. And when Grant came in, he's like, well, let's teach them how to do photography. And I was like, okay, how do we tie that into recovery? And full disclosure, I had never really touched a camera, never did anything off of manual. So this was a very new experience for me. And Grant started to talk about when he teaches photography, the things that he teaches, and the wheels started to connect a little bit. And the Seeing Lens was kind of born out of those two ideas kind of melded together. So again, this is a collaborative program that was developed through the Lebanon VA and Lebanon Valley College. And these are some of the original designers of the program. So really, when we looked at this, we were really trying to reach those veterans who really were struggling to engage in treatment, had difficulties connecting, difficulties staying with the treatment plan, a tendency to drop out of services, did not do well with talk therapies at all, and really wanted to look at something that could help the veterans to heal themselves, and focus on kind of the whole person approach and not just the issues. And all of, just FYI, all of the pictures that are in this slide presentation were taken by veterans. So even the pictures of the people taking pictures were taken by the veterans in the program. So the Seeing Lens really looks at, it emphasizes self-care, empowerment. One of the things that I think this program does much better than any of the other programs that I've been involved in is recognizing the importance of the mind, body, and spirit. And we're going to talk a little bit about that when I talk about when we first rolled this program out. And really looking at this idea of this intuitive awareness and mindfulness in healing, and acknowledging that recovery is a journey. It's not, okay, I'm going in for treatment and I had my treatment and now I'm done. It really is this kind of journey. And when I talk about recovery, I talk about it in terms of mental health recovery, substance abuse recovery, pain. It's a whole wealth of recoveries. So the Seeing Lens program, and I really like this quote by Dorothea Lange. We use the camera to teach people how to see. The camera became the instrument for them to be able to see the world differently. So the Seeing Lens program provides participants with the opportunity for self-exploration and self-discovery through photography-based interventions. And we're going to see what I mean when we talk about photography-based interventions that promote personal healing, recovery, and overall health and well-being. And the goals are increase self-awareness, increase the practice of mindfulness. And we're going to talk a lot about mindfulness when we talk about the program, to identify coping skills and to develop technical photography skills. And we're going to talk about that too, because one of the things that we learned early on was the self-esteem that came from the veterans' ability to develop the technical photography skills. That was not something that was planned early on in the program. The idea of the program really was, we're going to use the teaching of the photography skills and we're going to merge that with recovery skills. And there wasn't really a forethought to, if the veterans develop these skills, what is that going to do? And so after our first cohort, we really kind of took a step back and we're like, okay, this was an unanticipated but very good outcome. And we'll talk a little bit about how we changed things up a little bit based on that. Increase social interaction, increase health and well-being, and develop a healthy leisure lifestyle. The metrics that we use are a BSI, which just looks at symptoms, a participant subjective, program attendance, and participant responses. In addition, we also use a mindfulness-based assessment to measure mindfulness. And the mindfulness assessment was not an assessment that we used in the first cohort. It was in the first cohort that we realized how much mindfulness was such a significant part of this program. And the feedback from the veterans really indicated how important mindfulness was to the overall program and what they got out of the program. So the way the program is set up is 2-hour sessions over 10 weeks. They do an initial assessment, a post-assessment, and then they do, in each session, they do a pre-assessment and a post self-assessment. And that's the information that we gather to look at our metrics. The sessions are structured with a self-assessment at the beginning, They have a recovery prompt, and we're going to look at that. And then they have the lecture on the technical elements of photography. We look at the photography project for the session. We do the photography project on site, and then we have a group discussion and a reflection. So before I get into the programmatic structure, and we're actually going to go through session by session, so you're able to see how the sessions worked. One of the things when we were developing the program, we were looking at what are those things in recovery that the veterans really seem to struggle with. What is it that kind of trips them up a lot? And we kind of had our list of those. And then Grant came in and started talking about how he teaches photography and the things that he teaches. And we're like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. Like these two things will really kind of merge and complement each other. So the very first session is the mechanism of the camera. And in that session, we talk about the components of recovery. So you'll be able to see, I'm not going to go through this whole slide. It's just in there to give you an overall general idea, because we are going to go through each of the sessions. So before we kind of go through the sessions, just another little bit of a backstory. So I don't know if any of you have ever worked with the federal government, but in the federal government, there is a lot of red tape. And the biggest red tape for us was not the cameras and doing photography on the VA campus, although that was a big barrier at times. The biggest barrier for us is the computers. We use a computer for bringing up the photos onto the larger screen as the photographer goes through the photos and provides critique on the photos. And the veterans talk about them. That was our biggest challenge, was getting the computer, because the VA is very, very, and the federal government, all of our computers are tied into the network, and the computer that we were getting could not be tied into the network. So it really took us the longest time to get the actual computer that we needed in order to process the photographs. We use Canon digital cameras, and we've been able to upgrade some of our cameras to the T7. A lot of our cameras are the T6. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the program materials. So each veteran will get a binder, a seeing lens binder, and they will have use while they're on campus of one of the Canon cameras. And we do have the digital photography complete course if veterans want that book. We still do have some copies of that book. Okay. So one of the other pieces before we get completely into the sessions is, and this is again, one of those unexpected but very good outcomes. So when we started early in this program, Grant, who was the photography professor at Lebanon Valley College, he did the first cohort and the second cohort with us. And one of the things that Grant was very good at was composition and being able to look at a photo and provide feedback on that photo. It would have, had you adjusted here, had you adjusted there, this would have, it would have made the photo look a little bit better. The focus could have been here. And the very first session that we did, when he was critiquing, both the social worker and I were like, okay, the veterans are never coming back. Like, because a lot of the veterans that we work with any negative or perceived negative is really internalized. And so we were really concerned that what they were hearing was you suck at photography and you suck at life. And so, you know, they're just not going to come back. So we were like, okay, how are we going to fix this? And we were shocked because the veterans were like, yeah, oh yeah, yeah. If I'd done that, that would have, and then they were critiquing each other's. And, you know, if a photo was great, they were like complimenting each other. If it was so different from what we had thought. And this became a big part of the benefits of the program also, is the veterans, the camaraderie between the veterans. And the further we got into the skill sets, the more they would help each other out. Again, an anticipated outcome, but an outcome that really, I think, helped with the veteran self-esteem. So let's see how we kind of put this all together. And I don't get the privilege of being able to run this program anymore. I would really love to get back to it, but unfortunately, admin side of the house takes my attention away. But being in the first two cohorts, at some point, all of us just kind of looked at each other and were like, I don't know what we did and I don't know how we did it, but somehow we did something good. And we really saw that in the outcome measures in the first cohort, and made some changes based on this. So let's look at the sessions, and you know, we'll go through the sessions. If anybody has questions, put them in chat and we can answer them as we go if you want to.
Leave it.
So the very first session is the mechanics of the camera and looking at the components of recovery. So when the veterans come in, they will look at what we call the points to ponder, which is the very first thing that we talk about before we introduce the camera skill, before we introduce anything else. So the points to ponder are the parts working together. So again, if not all the parts of your camera are working together, then your picture is not going to come out well. The same with the components of recovery. If you don't have all the pieces of recovery in place, your recovery isn't going to be successful. You're going to get a marginal picture, but it's not going to be successful. We talk about what you need to have in place for a successful recovery and what components of recovery are working well and what components need some adjustment. So this is what we bring up, have a little discussion in the beginning. Then the photographer will come in and go through the camera. Talk about the components of the camera. We will work on putting in the battery and the drive, the flash card. And each veteran gets to keep their flash card. So they're issued the flash card. And then we will go out, take pictures, the very first pictures, come back, pull up the pictures. And then as the pictures are coming up, we will have this discussion of the points to ponder. What is working, what's not working. And during that session, one of the participant responses was, you need to have all the pieces in place for recovery. The same as with the camera. If something is off, you won't get a good picture, and you're going to need to fix it. So again, a very powerful kind of first session in really looking at how those two things kind of merge together. So the next one, patterns and textures. And this was the session, I think, where we fully understood the powerfulness of mindfulness in photography. We totally missed it. We totally missed it when we started this program. But just the fact that we had several veterans in the first cohort who had pretty significant history of PTSD. And several of them came up afterwards and said, that was the first time in years that I focused on a picture. I focused on walking around, looking at where I wanted to take a picture of patterns and textures. And I didn't think about what was behind me, if I needed to get myself ready, if I needed to be on high alert. My brain allowed itself to shut off. And just really, really powerful, this idea of mindfulness. And that just ran through the whole 10 weeks. So by the second cohort, we had changed this to mindfulness. And we really talk a lot about mindfulness in this session. And in this session, we also talk about the patterns in life and how do these patterns support your recovery? How do they impede your recovery? What are healthy patterns? What are not healthy patterns? And then we go off on around campus, and the veterans again will take pictures. This is one of those pictures. Come back, pull them up. While the pictures are coming up and the photographer is providing critique, we will talk about these points to ponder and really look at, the mindfulness piece. And again, you can see one of the participant comments from this session. The next session is lines and shapes. And again, we pull in recovery by looking at what direction are you going? Where's that line taking you? Where's your focus? What are your boundaries? Do you let people walk over your boundaries, or do you set boundaries and then decide, okay, well, I'm, not going to keep that boundary anymore and just walk over that? Some really good discussions came out of this one. Again, same process. Veterans go around the VA looking for lines and shapes, taking pictures. Usually by this session, you can see the veterans kind of start to work together and point things out. Oh, this was a good place to go. This was a good place to go. So again, coming back, pulling up the pictures, and that is why we need a photographer, because this piece of helping the veterans to understand how to take a picture of lines and shapes, what are lines and shapes, and then being able to offer that critique and help the veterans as they're walking around the VA to take pictures. And this is personally one of my favorite sessions, and one of the ones that I found to be the most powerful. And that's that idea of keystoning, where you create distortion with the camera. The one thing I did not like about this session was when they actually let us go up on the roof of one of the tallest buildings. So they let us go 6 floors up. And I'm not a big height person, but I did it. I did it each time so that they could take, pictures shooting down. I think this was really, really powerful because you can't argue against it. So we would go out, do these pictures, talk a lot about cognitive distortions, what they are, this idea that the messages that you're sending to yourself are really distorting your thinking. All of those negative messages you're sending to yourself are distorting your thinking and distorting your perception of self. Get back in afterwards, and we would have these really wonky pictures of, like, if you've seen the buildings at the VA, these big brick buildings that have this kind of look like they're leaning. And we would discuss, okay, is that building really leaning? No. Okay, why does it look like it's leaning? Because that was the angle that I took with the camera. It's the way I took the photograph. Okay, so you used your camera to create a distortion. Yes. Can you use your mind to create a distortion? And we had some really good discussions on this. And really, some of the veterans came up after that first session and were like, I never thought about it that way. Like to actually see it, and to realize that I can do that to myself. Again, really, really powerful session. And then we did composition, pure color, and rule of thirds. This session, again, was powerful. And full disclosure, I had a lot of issues with the rule of thirds because I wanted everything to be in the center. So I had to challenge myself on that, and have come to appreciate the rule of thirds. But we saw that a lot in the veterans also, is this kind of, it needs to be perfect. It has to be perfect, and perfect was right in the middle. So there was a lot of challenging, and this really idea that it's okay to be off balance. It's okay to be off balance and still have recovery. It's okay for things not to be perfect. And again, a lot of discussion on this. And this is really, again, you know, all of your photographers, where we really started to talk about this idea of composition, and where the critique really started to pick up. So much more critique in the photographs, a lot more feedback for the veterans in terms of the photographs that they were taking, things like that. Then we moved to off of automatic, and we moved into the manual controls. And there were two kinds of veterans. If the veterans had any type of, we had a veteran in one of the groups who actually flew helicopters. So manual for that veteran, and manual for one of the other veterans who was in there, who did some work with radar. They were very focused on the manual pieces of it. Very, very technical pieces. Technically very, very good with the camera. Struggled with what to focus on. Then we had the other side of the house, where there were a lot of veterans who knew what to focus on, but had trouble kind of figuring out the getting off of that automatic and into manual. This is where we really talked about that locus of control. That idea that a good photograph isn't just a matter of chance. Just like good recovery isn't just a matter of chance. It goes with understanding how all the pieces work together. And this idea of locus of control. This idea that you do have control over what happens in your life. You do have control about the decisions that you make. And you can make adjustments on your camera to get a better picture. If you adjust one place, you may need to adjust another place also. So this idea of how to get a better picture, and at the same time, this idea of locus of control, where you really are in control. Again, really eye-opening for the veterans. Really kind of an opportunity to take a step back and realize that they don't have to stumble through recovery. They do have some control over those pieces. Then we moved on to aperture. And again, here we really focused on how to seek clarity, how to minimize the distractions. What are you really focusing on in your recovery? And this is where we brought in the tripod. And when we brought in the tripod, we really talked about the tripod as a support. What supports do you have in recovery? Without using the tripod, you're going to get really shaky. You're not going to get a clear picture. So you have to have supports in order to be able to get a clear picture, to get a clear recovery. Again, this is where the skills of the photographer come in, and really being able to teach these technical aspects, and then help bringing those technical aspects into the discussion. And this was probably my second favorite or my first favorite, and that was portrait. Very, very challenging area for many of our veterans. Many of the female veterans in the photography group had issues with military sexual trauma. Many of the veterans had post-traumatic stress disorder. Many of the veterans had very high levels of anxiety, very high levels of depression. And the idea that they would sit for a portrait session was very, very challenging. What we learned in the portrait session were two major things. First, that the veterans were willing to step outside of themselves and put themselves in really uncomfortable situations. And second, their support for each other. The idea that if somebody was willing to put themselves in a very vulnerable position, that whole group was going to support that person in that choice. We got some really, really good portraits. These are just, an example of those. This is a longer session. It takes us longer to do this session. We do more processing in this section, in the session, because of the personal nature of it, and the feelings sometimes that it can bring up in veterans. We talk really about that vulnerability, about that idea of letting other people see their true self, and being in a position where other people, the perception could be to be taken advantage of. So very, very powerful session. Takes a little bit longer, also takes longer because of setup. Again, the need for the photographer. And we're actually very lucky now. We do have the setup at the VA that we can do the portraits at the VA. We used to have to go to Lebanon Valley College for this session, but we can actually do these now at the VA. We were able to get some additional equipment through a grant. Then we do 4 pictures for recovery. And at this point, the veterans have been using the camera on manual, and they randomly pick words from a hat, recovery words, and then they have to go out and take pictures of those. They can use whatever photography techniques they want to use, and then they have to come back and share why those pictures represent the recovery words that they chose. And then we have a discussion on that. One of the hardest things about this particular session is trying to get them not to take 100 pictures. We're like 1 picture for each word. And that can be difficult. But it really is, try to get them to do the 1 picture was a bit of a challenge. And then the last session that we do is the freelance independent project. And so the idea of the last session was that the veterans would be able to sit individually with the photographer, and actually the person with the camera is Grant, who helped develop this program from LVC, is that each veteran who was in the program would get to sit with the photographer, go through their pictures, and pick out 2 that they really liked And then we would print those two out for them. We would get them printed out through like Shutterfly or one of those. And then if they wanted to, we do a gallery showing, they could put their photo in the gallery showing. So that was the idea. So while the other veterans were sitting with the photographer, while one was sitting with the photographer, the others would be out and about. It didn't happen that way. Everybody wanted to see everybody else's pictures. So each veteran was able to go through their camera card. And as they went through, the group gave them feedback on, yeah, I like that one. No, that one's really good. No, that one. And eventually they would whittle it down to, 2 or 3 that they really wanted to be able to print out. This is also where the last session is also where we do the final assessments, and we just kind of pull everything together during this session. And a little bit about, this program data is a little bit outdated, but we're still seeing a lot of the same outcomes, definite decreases in loneliness, nervousness, and increases in confidence, decreased stress, anxiety. We saw the greatest increase in the feeling of being present. And we saw that on our first cohort. And that's when we started to bring in that mindfulness piece. Through the whole 10 weeks, a lot of that feedback was on that mindfulness piece. And the idea of increased emotional regulation. Our first 2 cohorts, we had a 94% attendance rate and 0 no-call, no-shows, which in the VA is phenomenal. We actually had a veteran who was in the emergency room tell his doctor that he could not do the treatment the doctor wanted him to do until the doctor made sure somebody called and said he was in the emergency room and he couldn't be there for a session. And these are just some of the numbers. The qualitative data that we were able to gather, again, indicated increased confidence, self-awareness, socialization, the sense of belonging, the sense of feeling comfortable in their own body. The other outcomes that we saw, this is the top of the building at the VA. The immediate changes, veterans immediately saying, once they started looking through that viewfinder, their ability to understand mindfulness, so many veterans would say, I understand now. I understand what they've been trying to tell me all these years. I get it. Empowerment, social connections. Many of the veterans ended up connecting with each other. And those that had their own cameras would plan to go out and do photography outside of the sessions. And development of lifelong leisure interest. 40 to 50% of the participants we had actually went out and purchased a camera of their own. Just a little bit about some of the other outcomes. So some of the other outcomes that we had were we actually ended up developing a camera club for after the Seeing Lens, because we had so many participants say, what comes next, what comes next, what comes next. So we actually developed a camera club. Unfortunately, we got hit by COVID, just like everybody else. And I believe we got through 3 cohorts. It might've been 4. I think we were into our 4th when we actually had to shut down. And then it's not a program you can do VVC. We did develop some other photography programs we could do, virtually, but Seeing Lens was on hold for about 3 years. The program was so successful that we actually have branched out to about 18 other VAs. Some are doing it in the pure Seeing Lens form, the 10 sessions. Others are doing it 2 sessions a week. We do it 1 session a week. Some are doing it 2. Some are modifying it a little bit because they don't have veterans who can do the whole 10-week program. But it is branched out now to 18 other VAs across the country. And several other VAs are looking at branching out to bringing the program to their VA. Some of the challenges, we've actually have been able to overcome a lot of those challenges. The individual with the book in this photograph is Teresa Stumpklinger, one of the founders of the program also. We've been very lucky with equipment. The only equipment that we still are really challenged with are computers. It takes literally an act of Congress for us to get a computer for this program. We're really trying to purchase some additional computers so that we can move into things like Lightroom and end processing. We've had a lot of veterans interested in that, and we'd like to build a program around that. We were very lucky. We have a awesome space where we can do photography and many other recreation and art therapy programs. The training and the skills, after going through the program myself for 3 cohorts, my skills definitely increased, but nowhere near that a photographer can bring to this program. The other benefits I think of having a photographer in this program is they're a neutral person. So the veterans sometimes are a little bit hesitant when it's therapy, and the photographer really lends a component to this program that if we were to do it and teach the skill piece of it and the recovery piece of it, I think it loses something. The photos, we've actually been really lucky with that. We were able to find places where we could get them processed. We've made changes to the session format, and we've actually been able to increase some of our venues. Right before COVID hit, we were actually able to take the veterans in the camera club to Washington, DC. And we did a photo session there in DC. So building on our successes, the photography club, we've actually had 3 gallery showings, one in Washington, DC, one at Lebanon Valley College, and one at the VA. We are looking more at Facebook, although that is a challenge in and of itself because of privacy issues and things like that. We did start a mindfulness-based photography group. We did that over VVC. We were able to go to DC. We were able to do a fall tour of colors. And we're still looking at doing some of those other photography outings. Okay. And any questions? Sorry, that was a lot of information in a little bit of time.
I have a question here. David was asking, was there any part of the recovery related to the camera's feature of sensitivity to light? Such
No.
as, okay.
Well, yes and no. So there were a couple of sessions where we did get into that light sensitivity when we were working with Grant. And I believe that there were a couple of sessions where they got into it. We have a photographer that works in our program at Lebanon. We don't do it in a session per se, but it will sometimes come up, particularly if we're having to make adjustments for light. And then that sometimes will come into the discussion.
We have a couple
Yeah.
questions from the group here.
That was a
Yes,
Questions?
oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
presented that looked quite promising. Were there any other new therapies that were being done at the same time that might have added to the positive results that you found, or was everything else pretty static during the 10-week program and the testing?
So the first two cohorts, actually the first three and halfway through the fourth, we actually had a lot of veterans in those programs who were not actively engaged in any behavioral health programs. We were one of the few programs they were attending at that point. We actually had a veteran in one of our programs who had never made it through a group before at all. She would enroll in, a group program and leave after the second session. So I feel pretty confident in the data and what it was showing. I think when we took our step back and pulled in the mindfulness piece of it, I think those numbers were even more telling. I think that they definitely showed a significant increase in the components of mindfulness. So I think, and we're getting the same numbers or types of numbers from the VAs that are reporting. So the VAs that are running it across the country send us their data. And we were seeing a lot of the same results from that.
The example you gave is extremely supportive, and that was excellent. The other VA programs that have started this, have they made changes to your basic program? And if so, what did they do?
So the ones that made changes, we had a couple shift it from once a week to twice a week. We had a few who did not have the ability to do the portrait session at all. They had difficulties with finding locations and things like that. And we had one who had to do some of the sessions. So they had to pare it down to 5 sessions because their veterans are in that program for 6 weeks. And the first week is a pretty intensive week where they're not able to do the photography program. So they had to pare it down to 5 sessions. We don't gather data from the one that's just 5 sessions. We did help them kind of go through and pick which ones we thought were going to be the best in that situation. But for the most part, it was rolled out as is. We were very lucky when we were part of an innovation network when we first started this program. And when it proved to be successful, we moved to what they call the seed part of that program. And so we were actually able to work with 5 VAs in the very beginning and buy all their supplies and everything for the program to get them started. And then from there, several other VAs were like, we want it here. So we're able to get grant money from the VA. Every year they do a creative arts grant. So a lot of the facilities were able to get cameras through that.
From a practical point of view, have you looked at doing this as a weekend retreat and practical, I mean, from the photographer who might be helping you? I realize that it might be long for the vets to be there for 6 hours on Saturday and 6 for Sunday. And there is a continuity of doing it over 10 weeks. But have you thought about doing a retreat type of program?
So we have thought about doing a retreat. We haven't thought about doing necessarily a compact seeing lens in that retreat. Prior to COVID, we had talked about doing photography retreats for veterans who had gone through any of the therapeutic photography programs. and then offering a retreat, whether it was a weekend or, you know, a day where we could work on skills, look at recovery, things like that. But probably our vision of it was a little bit less structured than the Seeing Lens, and really kind of a you have been working hard at recovery and really looking at helping them to kind of get that needed boost towards sustaining recovery. And we also do, we've also looked at photography workshops. So bringing in photographers, people that might have a specialty area. One of the things that we've talked a lot about, and as soon as we can get the computers, we would like to have a workshop for like Lightroom or end processing, because that's been one of the things that the veterans have really talked about, who've gone through the Seeing Lens program, is being able to edit photos.
One more question.
Okay.
About the computers, do they need to be bought by the government? Can they be used by someone else?
They do not need to be purchased by the government. It is when we purchase them by the government that we run into.
I'm done.
So, but yes,
My meeting's over.
So you're open to donations then?
yes.
Why, do you have a few?
No.
No, I asked her if she has a few.
How do they then get on the VA network if they're an outside?
We don't. So we don't. That's where the issue comes in, is when the VA is very hesitant to purchase a computer that is not going to be a VA computer. Like, we have to jump through 10,000 hoops to say this will never be hooked up to the VA network. We promise, we cross our heart, we will never hook it up to any VA network. That's where the issue comes in. And so it's a bit of a process to go through to get it. But we've been very lucky in having the grant money to be able to do that. So.
And I know,
in need of more cameras?
are you in need of more cameras, was the question.
Yes, we are branching out to Berks. And we will have to get cameras for out there, depending on how large that program becomes.
Yeah, that was my question. How many
members
participants?
Groups?
So we try to limit it to about 8, because we really feel like if we go past 8 in a session, it loses its integrity as a program. It really is a very structured type of program. And the photographer is really, I think, stretched if there's more than 8 people with trying to help. You know, particularly when you're making adjustments on the camera and things like that. So I think we do about 8 a cohort, but right now we have 3 therapists who are able to facilitate the program. So we could be running it simultaneously with, you know, 8 veterans in each of those cohorts.
I asked about the need for cameras because there is a shop in Reading, Retro Photo. And the owner of that shop, Michael, has a collection of Nikon digital cameras that he tried to offer to schools in New York City. But the New York City contract required Sony cameras. So the city of New York would not take his donation of hundreds of digital cameras because they were Nikon. So he would be a very good contact for you. Retro Photo on 5th Street in Reading. We
Okay.
may, I know a year ago, he was looking for a place to donate this particular collection of good Nikon cameras.
That would be great. Thank you.
I know that when I worked at Drexel, they couldn't accept used cameras. So, and there's plenty of good equipment out there. So we'll keep our eye out and our ear out for you guys too. Getting the collection, all 8, is usually the challenge. But like Vince said, we have a connection here down in Reading that might have a supply. So we'll contact them for you and get you in contact with them.
Okay. Thank you.
Now this gets me very excited. I want to get started, get my paperwork through. And I know I saw some eyes pop open here too. So when we're ready, we have some other volunteers who we can
Okay.
bring.
Okay. Yes. And as we, I think, start to really open up a little bit more and are able to, bring in, more veterans and develop our program, we will be looking for some specialty, kinds of things that the veterans had been requesting. So,
If you could pass that list along to us so
Yep.
we can think about it too. That'd be great. The question was, when do we expect this to start in Berks? It's in the works. Any idea?
yes. It's in the works. I think that there is some forward movement on, being able to bring the photographer in. So I think that I am guardedly optimistic that we will move forward quicker than we had anticipated.
Oh, good. So they found some paperwork that I mailed, hopefully.
I think that they are, going to be willing to let us start before it's all processed.
Oh, okay. We have some chat. I don't know if you can see the chat. I work at an environmental learning center called Rock Hollow Woods. I can do retreats. Oh, I know where that is. It's a very nice a youth camp out in Berks, southern Berks County, just below Birdsboro, 67 acres. So something like that. It's a nature youth camp, very nice facility. So if you're open to something like that, that's not too far from your location in Berks. Yeah. Okay, Marshall has a question.
That would be awesome. Kaylin, can you take that information down?
Yes, I was just about to do that actually.
Thank you.
All right, Amy, my question is, you just hit a little bit on paperwork, and actually Bob did, but I know that as far as different paperwork and things like that, I know I have worked in some other areas where I was working with kids, and you got to go through all kinds of paperwork with kids. I guess you don't have to do that with adults or with veterans, or am I wrong on that? And you do have to.
So it is a process to get your paperwork completed through the VA. You do have to get fingerprinted and all of that. They will on occasion let a volunteer volunteer because they won't be. So in the situation with the Seeing Lens, there's always going to be a therapist there. So, it's not like the photographer is going to be running the program with no therapist or oversight. So in those situations, they will sometimes allow the volunteer to start, particularly if it's an access issue. So at this point, if we have veterans who want to be in this program and the tripping point is the processing of the paperwork, and we feel like there's going to be oversight, they will sometimes make an exception while the paperwork is in process, to allow the photographer to come through.
Yeah, there's background checks and things like that that you have
Yeah.
to do. Medical situation. So it's really a hospital medical situation. So.
Mm.
Comment from Karen? I'll lend you my card. Is there only one photographer in each session? That was a question. What is the process if people want to help?
So one of our cohorts, we were very lucky and were able to have 2 photographers. We actually had 10 veterans in that session, so that was very helpful. I can, having gone through it and taking some, online photography courses, I can assist, as can most of the therapists who have gone through the program, several times. We can provide some level of assistance. So it's helpful to have more than one photographer if you have a larger group, just because I think you get more of the skills piece. But we really, I think, have been able to manage. I think sometimes some of the veterans will pick up on the manual pieces quicker and then offer assistance. So that works out well.
It sounds like it becomes team building.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. And that's what it's all about. It's a support group in the therapy
Hmm.
environment, correct? Yeah.
I without my piece of creating this program, there are times when I step back and I say, I really don't know how we did it. I don't know how we created this thing. But it really works. It's just something that works. And I was very glad to be part of it. I was it was a very humbling experience to really be able to see when you put something together and you just see the outcome. I mean, you just see the change in the veterans from session 1 to session 10. It's just, it's humbling, and it's really, to me, it's very meaningful.
I see Clay in the chat. He said he has questions. If you want to ask that question, Clay. I think he's still with us.
Yeah, hi. What awesome program. I am a veteran, and I think what you're doing is great. I also created a book. I don't know if you can see it or not. Can't see it.
Getting there.
It's
on your face, Clay. Not
Unconditional Honor. I think.
Okay. Yep.
I don't know why it's not focusing.
That's okay.
Anyway, I would be willing to help out with if any of the veterans have pets. This book is about service and therapy dogs. We did a great photo shoot at Longwood Gardens, and most of the people there, it was from one training group. There was several groups that I contacted that train service dogs, and one was, I think they were in Westchester. So we all met at Longwood Gardens, and some of these people were pretty shut down, but when they're with their dogs, it's like a whole different thing. And Longwood Gardens was very peaceful. It was very nice. But I've been involved in animal rescue for like 20 years, and I have a lot of experience in, well, natural history, abstract, and pets. So anyway, I'd be willing to help out with pets or whatever.
That would
I don't
be
know
wonderful.
if I could actually lead a class or anything, but I would definitely, I think I could help out, and I think what you're doing is great. So
Thank you. Yeah, that would be wonderful. We actually did, we were able to, right before COVID, work with the Harrisburg Humane Society. And we took veterans who had been through the Seeing Lens program and those that were in it. We took them to the Humane Society, and they did a photo shoot of the dogs for the holidays.
Oh, nice.
So that was great.
Yeah. One of the groups that I worked with, I forget the name of. They were in Harrisburg. They trained pet service dogs. It's right in Harrisburg. Yeah. Anyway, I'll be at, just, I'll
No,
be.
that would be great.
Yep.
Thank you.
Sure, of course.
Thanks, Clay. I knew once they presented this, we're gonna get flooded with volunteers from this group. One question, it's been asked a couple times. This is in Lebanon County right now, and they're moving another program into Berks VA, which is out, what's the address, Amy? The Berks location.
That
It's
would,
right across from Target.
Right across from Target, yeah. That helps.
yeah, I don't know the exact physical address, but I can get that to you.
Paper Mill Road out that direction, yes. Okay.
Mhm.
Mhm.
That's the whole purpose.
Program be done there?
Yes, they're gonna start it in the Berks location. So, they're branching off into Berks. And that's why they contacted us, because they wanted volunteers close to this location. Yeah, but it's gonna be a start up here. What was the question?
If we offer their graduates the program.
Oh, once they find out about the Berks Photographic Society, they'll all come flooding here. Like Amy said, they have a photo club that has developed out of these sessions, at least in Lebanon, and probably will happen in Berks also. But yeah, if they ever feel comfortable coming here, we'll give them the information, because we're very close to the VA here.
And I think that's one of the other benefits is, we talk about this idea of a warm handoff, and having somebody facilitating the group at Berks, they know somebody, they're familiar. So they're more likely to go to the Berks Photography Club because they've already met somebody. So it's an idea of a warm handoff as opposed to, okay, here's the information, go show up. That's less likely to happen. So having photographers to be part of that group, then the veteran already knows somebody.
Right. And our location actually is the Goggle Works. I don't know if you know what it is, but it's an art facility with many art programs here. Woodworking, metalworking, pottery, and it's what, 3-4 stories of studio spaces. A lot of people here probably could connect also with the veterans too. It's a very art creative environment here. It's not just us as photographers. So it's a creative, thoughtful place for them to walk into also.
Yes.
Yeah, and there could be a lot of other programs branching out of the Goggle Works too, because of the artists that are here and creative. They do have gallery space, so maybe we'll something like that.
Are they looking for one photographer to do all 10 sessions, or would that be a rotating thing?
The question is, are you looking for one volunteer to do all 10 sessions? And they already talked about that with me. Go ahead and explain it, Amy.
So we try to keep the photographer consistent. But that being said, we would welcome anybody who is willing to go through the volunteer process. We find ourselves sometimes, if the photographer is sick, or, to be able to have that backup. We get in situations where Berks could be like a magnet, and we get a flood of veterans who want to have the program there, and we have to run 2 groups. So, then having that photographer. It's also good because we are looking at other types of photography and other types of, photography programming that I think, the more avenues we have and the more photographers we have, I think that would lend itself to us being able to branch out a little bit more.
There are a group of men at the Reading Homeless Shelter who are veterans. Stable men who are continuing to be homeless. So I wondered whether that might be a place to look at and maybe have a discussion with our director.
Yes.
Rescue mission. And I know some of those veterans are, have been, quote, promoted to responsible duties at the shelter. So they're not just residing at the shelter, but they're actively working to do things at the shelter. And this might be an extra avenue of support for those men as well. So that's the Hope Rescue Mission.
Okay. Yeah, that would be, I think a really good connection. We had talked about doing some photography with homeless veterans. That was pre-COVID. We had really looked at doing almost a seeing lens type of program with something a little bit structured a little bit differently.
Yeah, Vince mentioned that because he's been connected with that group too through our club. Vince, you've done photography up there. You know, we do some of their fundraising, photo shoots, things like that. So yeah, we try to branch out into the nonprofits in the area, and that's just one of them. You know. And I remember when Vince went up there the first time, he was very, very moved. I don't remember how you explained it, Vince, but it's very moving to help these people.
Yeah, definitely.
Much
Kaylin,
more-
if you can write down those connections, because that would be a good conversation to have, because we really had looked at specifically the homeless population, veterans.
I don't aim to hog this mic, but since Bob mentioned this, I would say the little bit of time that I spent over at Hope Rescue was extremely more meaningful for me, I suspect, than for the men that were there. And I would venture that this program, which sounds pretty spectacular to extremely deserving people who have been harmed for us, will carry the same emotional weight to those who are involved. Very, very positive emotional weight. It's a wonderful job that you're doing.
Thank you.
The way that you explained it to me, that there's a sense of trust that the photographer has to build with the group. That's the way they don't really want rotating photographers, but it would definitely be helpful to have two, with even a group of 8. So we can pass names to you as we get. I don't want to hog the program, that's for sure, because I know that there's at least 4 or 5 people looking at me right now that said, I want to do this. I was the first name because I picked up the email and I said, yes. But yeah, as it grows, we definitely need more volunteers, photographers. And if we have 2 or 3 with a group of 8, it just works better. We've done workshops here but it wasn't therapy. And it's always better to have more than one person because you get spread thin. So as the therapists are working their side of things, we can be working the other side of things. So yeah, this is going to work out very well, I think, because I know I see a lot of excitement, and I knew that was going to happen as soon as you presented tonight. So I really appreciate you guys taking the time and coming in and presenting this to the group, because this is really what we're about. We're a nonprofit, and part of our charter is education and social work with the area and connecting with the area. So, and it helps us hear what we've been telling ourselves all these years. I need photography. Do this. That's what we tell our spouses that aren't in photography. This makes us mindful. I know we know exactly what you're telling us. As soon as you look through that viewfinder, everything else goes away, and you're just one-pointed, everything quiets down, everything slows down. And you capture the beauty around you too, when you see all those beautiful lights and, you know, all those colors and everybody has to be creative. And that really opens you up to a whole new world. So I'm so glad that you emailed us. And how did you find us? I think it's Caitlin, you're the one that emailed, weren't you?
Yeah, I think Emily and I just kind of did a search to try and find some resources in the area when I pitched the idea to bring the program to the Berks Clinic. She pulled up your email. She's like, "Here you go." Gave him a quick email, a contact, and that's now we're talking. So
Sitting
Yeah,
right here.
our other photographer is from the Lancaster Camera Club, the
Mhm.
one that does Lebanon.
And he's going to help us get onboarded in some way, give us his experiences, correct? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm working with him in the group that I'm facilitating at Lebanon currently, and I've been kind of keeping him updated with the process as it goes along, and he's on board and ready to talk to you guys whenever we're ready to move forward. So
Yeah, keep us in the loop to let us know how things are going. And if they could push our paperwork through a little bit faster, that'd be nice. Um, at least it isn't lost. It didn't get lost. I don't have to fill it out again, I don't think. Okay. And I do have a second packet. So if you want to interview some of our potential volunteers, I can pass that packet on to them and get that started a lot faster too, if that helps.
Yep, and we can get more packets out.
Okay, thank you. All right. Any other questions, folks? Are we having applause or? Yeah, we've had some international